It's the summer of 1999 all over again. But is that a good thing? Well, if you're a Star Wars fan, you damn right it is.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
Over the weekend, Star Wars Episode 1 celebrated its 25th anniversary re-release. For those keeping track at home, no, it is not the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace, and no, the film isn't even 25 years old yet. That'll happen in just a few days. But logic be damned when the power of nostalgia is here, and the power of nostalgia has rocketed Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, to the number 2 spot at the box office almost 25 years after its initial release. 1999 was an epic year in film. It brought us such classics as The Matrix, American Pie, which you can watch on our Patreon, Bowfinger, but no matter what film we talk about from 1999, no matter how good or how bad, none of them have reached the heights that Star Wars Episode 1 did. In 1999 dollars, the film brought in over $924 million, but in today's money, it's well over $1 billion, and this re-release is another reason why The Phantom Menace can't be slowed down. Yeah, I'm surprised about that, and we'll talk about that after the news. But folks, stay tuned, because we're going to have a very interesting discussion at the end of this video, and you're going to want to make sure you're a part of it. But before we get into anything else, hit that thumbs up button to let YouTube know that you enjoy this content, hit subscribe, and share us everywhere you want WCBS to be. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and to celebrate its grand return to cinemas, this Star Wars Day celebration, it's not really Star Wars Day, The Phantom Menace earned $8.1 million at the US box office, making it the second highest grossing re-release of the past decade. It's also estimated that the film took in $300,000 from marathon screenings and 4-minute previews of the upcoming Star Wars series. The Acolyte also helped drive audiences back into cinemas to relive the summer of '99. No, it didn't. I saw that trailer. There will be another video on that later. I will run away from that show if I didn't have this channel. Combined with global ticket sales, The Phantom Menace earned $14.5 million this past weekend. For comparison, the 40th anniversary of the re-released Star Wars Return of the Jedi saw it open with a $5.1 million weekend in the US last year. The last couple of years have seen a newfound appreciation for the prequel trilogy, with fans looking back on it more fondly. That's the real story of The Phantom Menace. It has taken 25 years for the film to be appreciated. Is that a good thing? Let's talk about that and many other things. Every time you bring up a critique of Star Wars Episode 1, one of the things that people would always say is, it's a kid's film, you shouldn't judge it so harshly, you should look back on it differently because it was made for kids. Well, I was a kid when that film came out. I was 10 years old in the summer of 1999. I was prime Star Wars age to go see this movie. Did I like it? No, not at all. Actually, I hated this movie when it came out. Back then, I thought it sucked. I didn't like Jar Jar, I didn't like Anakin, I didn't like the Naboo Starfighter, I didn't like the designs of the Jedi, I didn't like Qui-Gon Jinn's hair, I didn't like anything. Only thing I liked from that movie was Obi-Wan Kenobi, because I recognized him from the other Star Wars movies, and Darth Maul was cool, but then he died at the end, and that sucked. See, if you were like 5 years old when you saw this movie in cinemas, you probably have the most strong nostalgia for this. But me being slightly older than you really pushes me out of that, because I'm not nostalgic for the film, I'm nostalgic for the hype around the film, and that's the thing I remember. That's the excitement I remember from The Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace to me was kind of like a balloon being deflated. It was built up for years. You were so excited. This balloon was huge! But instead of popping, you just kind of let it out and it sounded like a big old wet fart. Now I know I'm in the minority here, but I'm telling you this right now to set the stage, because I'm not really the biggest Phantom Menace hater at all. In fact, I haven't disliked it in quite a long time. But why the change? Why now? Why at 25 years? Well, actually, for me, it's not 25 years later, it's something else. See, back in 1999 when we got The Phantom Menace, I, like many other people, didn't like the movie because it was a disjointed mess. It was this big, overly long film full of stuff that was very boring and didn't make much sense. It talked about things that wouldn't be paid off for 6 years. It had elements and events that were boring at the time, and it took me almost a decade to enjoy that film. No, The Phantom Menace isn't an acquired taste like beer. It's one of those situations where if you don't have the full story, the first chapter makes no sense. That's the problem with all of Star Wars save for one film. Everybody likes to talk about this big, sprawling epic, this big, grand adventure, but each Star Wars film is a fragment of a story, and until you have all of it, there's no payoff except for the original Star Wars film. Empire Strikes Back has that problem, Return of the Jedi has that problem, and all of the prequels have that problem. There is no way you can watch any of those movies and understand all of the context. You can't say, well, George Lucas had a master plan and back in the day. No, whatever was on film in 1977 sticks, that's the standard, and you don't get to change it no matter how much revisionist history you buy into. Now, my whole stance on this film changed after the Clone Wars came out. It wasn't Episode 2 because I hated that one more than this film, and Episode 3 was great. I don't really have much to say. Is it perfect? No, the bad parts are the bad parts, but we all love the memes and the jokes and hello there and all that other random crap. So of course that film's going to stay in a positive place for a lot of people. But it's also pretty solid too. No, it wasn't until the Clone Wars came out that I saw the Star Wars universe that George Lucas was trying to create on a regular basis. It wasn't 3 overly long movies with bad dialogue and crappy effects that didn't age well. It was a weekly adventure story with characters that I had finally come to appreciate, like Anakin, doing the best things they've ever done. I would argue that everybody that's introduced in Episode 1, hell, I'd argue that anybody that exists in the prequels, their best moment is in the Clone Wars. Now, I'll give Obi-Wan a pass because he's an original Star Wars character, and the battle between him, Darth Maul, and Qui-Gon is awesome still to this day, and that's why we're really talking about the movie. But overall, I had to see the bigger picture and application to actually appreciate it. So after the Clone Wars dropped, my opinions on the prequels have changed. Even though I was alive for them, even though I saw them all during their initial launch, opening day for most of them, and I even closed out Episode 3 on 2 different continents, I didn't like Star Wars, the prequels, until the Clone Wars was out. Now, all these years later, I look back fondly because I understand what's going on. It's not a lot of bull crap about the Senate. It still is. But when you understand how the Senate works, or the war, or the subterfuge, or all these other elements that George Lucas was trying to squeeze into the story, they finally make sense. And now, Episode 1 love is here, and that makes a little sense too. Now, first, it's going to be the nostalgia, people that remember it because they love the way it made them feel 25 years ago. Like the people I saw with the popcorn buckets that I walked out of the theater after The Fall Guy, which I regret, and I saw those people with their popcorn buckets, and, you know, I saw the joy on their face. I saw the happiness, the love when they talked about Star Wars Episode 1. So much, in fact, that they didn't realize I was making fun of them the entire time for spending $50 on a popcorn bucket. Hollywood, studios, whatever you gotta do. I understand that you need to make movie theaters successful and viable. I thought paying $20 for a large popcorn and a drink was bad enough, but now you want to charge me $50 for a little R2-D2 that I can take home? Yeah, he's this tall. Yeah, he's collectible, but he holds about a cup of popcorn, and after the initial hype of the movie wears off, how stupid are you going to feel with a $50 popcorn bucket? So yes, the success of the Phantom Menace this weekend does reflect on the generation that grew up with it finally appreciating it, loving it, or coming back to show love for something they have always cared about since back in the day. I don't think that changes the appeal. I don't think that changes where the Star Wars brand currently sits. They're trying to tie in the success of the Phantom Menace with the hype for the Acolyte, which it is not one-to-one. They're not tied together. I understand why people like the Phantom Menace. I understand why people look back fondly. I understand why people went back to see the lightsaber duels. It's different to see these classic films on the big screen than it is to watch it on your phone, your computer, or even if you have a 65-inch TV at home. It's a little better to watch on a movie theater wall than your wall at home. Unless you live in a house that big, then join our Patreon page. You can sponsor WCBS and let us use your theater for all the drunk watches. So the realization I came to through all of this news, through all of this reflection, through all of this video so far, that it's finally time to admit that Star Wars Episode 1 has shaken its stigma publicly. No longer is Star Wars Episode 1 going to be seen as this terrible flop of a film, even though it never was. It's going to be seen differently. The constant success and love and nostalgia for this movie are going to show you that the criticisms of the Red Letter Media videos are invalid to a huge swath of people. So to any armchair critic who's going to use those reviews and parrot them at those people who love the Phantom Menace, be prepared for a lot of people going, I don't care. It's now in that nostalgia territory, kind of like E.T. E.T. is not a very good movie. I just watched it for the first time as an adult and it wasn't good, but it lives in that nostalgia period or that window where everyone's going to defend it honorably. It's not as good as The Goonies or Back to the Future or these other movies of the 80s, but it sits there because of nostalgia, even though the alien looks like a turd. Episode 1 doesn't have aliens that look like turds, they have aliens that step in turds, but it goes to show you that we're here with Episode 1. But here's the bigger question. Will Star Wars Episode 7 and the sequel trilogy do the same thing? You know, with all of the information I have and the 25 years of experience that we had with Episode 1, absolutely not. There's a difference between Star Wars Episode 7 and Star Wars Episode 1. You're in the beginning of something. You're introducing Star Wars to a whole new generation. At no point did Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, or Han Solo have lines of dialogue in the prequel trilogy. I almost said show up, but we see them as babies, and that counts technically, I guess. But my point is this. In '99, Lucas was creating a new Star Wars to appeal to a new generation, to finish his story, and to tie all of it together. In 2012, Disney bought Star Wars. In 2015, they released The Force Awakens, and The Force Awakens is not a pure film. It's not actually a film. It's like a science experiment. It's almost a mathematical equation. It's a formula. how to maximize money on nostalgia. The people that lined up to go see those movies were disappointed because the characters that they all loved were treated like crap and brushed aside for these new characters, which no one likes. Kids didn't like him, adults didn't like him. Only crazy feminists and robots on the internet liked Rey because they have ideals and beliefs that go on this side of everything, and I don't give a shit about that. I want a good Star Wars movie. You know, the politics in episode 1 are way more enjoyable than the politics in episode 7. Why? Because Star Wars takes place in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And those politics and the trade disputes and all those other things, well, they're a far cry from 2015 modern feminism and all the other stuff that they put in those films. People like to say, but Jeff, the prequels were a response to George Lucas and 9/11 and the war in Iraq. And I go, hey, person, episode 1 came out years before that tragedy. Episode 2 was pretty much done before stuff had happened. And then episode 3... okay? Like, it's a movie. It's a Star Wars movie. You're really trying to reach pretty hard there. And then by the time you get to episode 3, like the Clone Wars and all of these other Star Wars things that we had talked about for decades all of a sudden represent that? No. We're not talking about movies with political references to the real world. We're talking about putting bad politics in bad Star Wars movies. And what you're left with is a bunch of shit. I know that movie crossed $2 billion at the box office. But what happened to the rest of the trilogy? What happened to the rest of the films? It was a steep decline. Each one made less. Now, what happened with the prequel trilogy? Episode 2 was a huge drop, making under $700 million. But Episode 3 rebounded and made $850 million at the box office. Episode 7 made over $2 billion. Episode 8 made $1.3. Episode 9, just over $1 billion, and it was one of the most expensive films in history. So the Star Wars brand is not safe. It is not saved. It is not anything. Star Wars hasn't changed over the course of the weekend. I only say that to remind the people out there that want to use this success to promote the future of Star Wars. The audiences aren't buying it. When the numbers come out to show you how successful the new stuff is, then we'll talk. But all I see about these shows, including The Acolyte, which we'll talk about at a later date, aka later today, all I see about that shit is diminishing returns, dwindling audiences. It's the same thing, but my point is it's never good. Nobody goes on to talk about the qualities of these shows or how they're going to stick around forever. They're talked about for how expensive they are, how poorly they do, the negative crap around the social messaging from Disney and Lucasfilm, and how much the fans dislike it. So folks, it is obvious that I don't like the Star Wars sequel movies. You know that. It's been a long time. But I wanted to make a crystal clear point in this video. Even a film like The Phantom Menace that 10-year-old me did not like eventually became appreciated because the entire story had been told. By the end of everything, I had seen Darth Vader become Darth Vader, I had seen how everything went down, and then I watched the Clone Wars, which filled in the gaps and created a Star Wars universe that I thought was cool and different, but didn't shit on the originals. That is the difference between the prequels and the sequels. While the prequels may not be your cup of tea, and I'm not going to argue that they're great films like the original ones are, they're also not the pieces of crap that we get later on. And so give me 25 years. Will I be here on YouTube? Who knows? We'll probably have been on TV, married, divorced, dead. Who knows? We could be zombies in 25 years. But the point I'm trying to get at is, I can guarantee you that nothing from Disney Star Wars is going to make me change the way I feel about those movies. And if you weren't invested in those because of the nostalgia, then you probably weren't invested in them at all. Remember, folks, a lot of people go out to see movies just because they're the thing to do. The Michael Bay Transformers movies made a ton of money, but now they've been rebooted and no one cares or misses those films. But when they came out, they were all the rage. Not everything that dominates the box office is memorable for the right reasons. Most of the Fast and Furious movies are forgettable, and most of the new Star Wars films are just that, forgettable as well. On top of being terrible, and the fact that the people that make them pretty much hate you, and so it's okay if you don't like their movies. They find a way to dig on you on the internet, and that's just one of the extra reasons. But like I always say here on WCBS, the epitome of pop culture, I hate those films because they're bad films, and that is all a film needs to be hated by me. So folks, thank you for watching. Did you watch episode 1 over the weekend? I didn't, but we watched it on Thursday night to replace the podcast this past week. So if you want to watch Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace with us, well, join us here on the channel, and you can watch that video. It went live on Thursday night. If you're a patron, we're going to be putting that up with the movie, so you can watch along with us at home in the next coming days. But folks, let me know what you think about Episode 1 down in the comments below. 3 questions for today. When did you first see Episode 1? Who is your favorite character, and what was your initial reaction in 1999? or whenever you actually saw the film. But please put the years. I don't really need to know ages and stuff unless you want to tell, but I'm trying to figure out at what point in time did society start to accept episode 1. I go Clone Wars era because that show was pretty solid across the board, and look, it even made me like the character of Ahsoka. And then I wasted my time watching the show Ahsoka because I liked something that came from the Clone Wars. So you can see I'm done. I'm not going to go on another Star Wars tangent. But you know where I am going to go? Japan. Yes, folks, I've been talking about Star Wars Celebration Japan for a few months now, and I pulled the trigger on it. So, folks, it is official. WCBS is going to Japan. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, even though we like a lot of buts. But there's no way we're not going to Japan. The tickets are acquired, and we've already had our first step on the road to Japan. So, folks, you can help us. We're going to be doing a lot to raise funds, raise awareness, and get WCBS to the top of Mount Fuji and a whole lot more. And there's a quick way you guys can do it right now. If you head on over to stealingsolo.com right now, you can buy the remainder of our backstock. What that's going to do is 2 things. 1, I made you guys a guarantee. Once we sell through the remainder of Stealing Solo, I will go make you the sequel. And I want to make the 3rd book, Frankenfisher, The Bride of Solo, where they literally dig up the corpse of Carrie Fisher and reanimate it to make a Star Wars movie. That's coming. All you guys have to do is buy out the rest of Stealing Solo. But what we're going to do differently is everything that Stealing Solo sells, we're going to be putting that into the Japan Fund for WCBS. And we're not just going to Star Wars Celebration to stand around with microphones and talk about Star Wars for 2 hours. No. We are world-class bullshitters, the epitome of pop culture, and I'm not just going to Japan to talk about Star Wars. We're doing it all. If you like anime, manga, toys like I do, Japan is the perfect place. Hell, I don't even know which camera way my camera goes, but these are all from Japan. Those are from Japan. I like stuff from Japan, and you like stuff from Japan. So WCBS is going to Japan. Join us next year for all of that and more. But make sure you watch us each and every week on the podcast to get updates. And for a way to get involved, just ask us. Send an email to worldclassbs@mail.com, thebestmail.com. And just use the forward header of Japan, and we'll know what's up. But we're going to give you guys plenty of updates. We're almost a year removed. We're like 11 months and a couple days until Star Wars Celebration Japan. But we will be there. And I know you're thinking, oh man, what about WrestleMania in Vegas? Guess what? We'll be watching WrestleMania from Japan. So while we may not be in Sin City, we'll be in Japan. And I mean, I've been to Las Vegas 10 times. I've never been to Japan, and I'm excited. So, folks, we're going to ride bullet trains and eat sushi and go to Akihabara and all these other places. And guess what? You can go along with us. See, folks, this entire Star Wars Celebration Japan trip is going to be made as WCBS specials for 2025 and the rest of that year. So, folks, you can be a part of it. You can request stuff. If you're a patron and you want us to go somewhere special, well, join at our top tier, and we'll make sure we add that to the list of places to go, things to see, and, well, you'll never know who we're going to cross over with as well. So, like I say, folks, the channel's called World Class Bullshitters. Ignore the second part. You're kind of shortchanging yourself if you think we're full of it. No. It's an ironic name. But, folks, our new directive is to put the world in World Class Bullshitters. So, folks, join us in Japan next year, 2025. But until then, be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other. Stealing Solo asks the greatest what-if question of all time. What if a group of disgruntled Star Wars fans kidnap Harrison Ford and force him to remake Star Wars in their basement? That, and a whole lot more, is answered in Stealing Solo, a Captain's Parody. Stealing Solo has been called Laugh Out Loud Funny and the greatest Star Wars parody since Spaceballs, and it's available now for a limited time only. Go to stealingsolo.com, which is powered by Shopify, so you get the reward-winning safety and security, and get yourselves a copy today. Once we sell through this limited backstock, I'm going back to the drawing board to bring you the sequel, which parodies Luke Skywalker's fall from grace, and finally the closing chapter, which I can't wait to get to, Frankenfisher, the Bride of Solo. And yes, it's exactly what you think it is. So folks, the only way to get that is go to stealingsolo.com right now, get yourselves a copy, and enjoy the greatest Star Wars parody since Spaceballs.